On the fateful evening of April 15, 1993, a chilling crime unfolded in Georgia. Emmogene Thompson, a beloved 53-year-old grandmother, was ruthlessly murdered by the side of the road while she sat in her parked car. Her body was discovered inside her still-running car the following morning, leaving the community in shock and disbelief. The questions on everyone's mind were who could have committed such a horrific act, and why. Hello, and welcome to Maya's reality channel, where we bring you compelling true crime stories. From unsolved mysteries to notorious criminals, we leave no stone unturned as we navigate the dark corridors of real-life crimes. So don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more. Now, let's get back to the story. The story leads us to Georgia Interstate 85, right into the heart of Gwinnett County, a mere 30 miles from bustling downtown Atlanta. Despite its proximity to the city, Gwinnett County is a world apart, boasting a rich history that once belonged to Creek and Cherokee Indians. Today, it's home to nearly 500,000 residents, living in tight-knit communities dotted with one-street towns, strip malls, and the annual Gwinnett County Livestock Show and Fair. This place is where the horrifying case of Emmogene Thompson began. Emmogene's case is the kind that will leave you with chills because it happened in a place where citizens once trusted the police to safeguard their community. However, the emergence of this startling crime left everyone questioning their sense of security. 53-year-old Emmogene used to live in a trailer home with her son. One day, she reported to the Gwinnett County Police Department that about half of the $14,000 in cash that was in her possession had been stolen. Officer Michael Chappell of the Gwinnett County Police Department was the first to respond. He investigated the reported theft of $6,000 at the trailer home of Emmogene Thompson and determined that the money had been taken by someone familiar with its location. Officer Chappell reasoned that it must have been taken by Mrs. Thompson's son, Michael, since there had been $12,000 at that location, and no burglar would take only half of it. Mrs. Thompson had also reported that her son, Michael, had previously taken a sum of $300 belonging to her. With this revelation, Officer Chappell concluded that Michael had taken the $6,000. Mrs. Thompson decided to file a report with the police, but when Officer Chappell revealed to her that he would probably have to arrest Michael if a report was filed, Mrs. Thompson held back her request. Regardless, Officer Chappell filed the report of the incident, but did not complete it or turn it in. Feeling that he could probably handle the incident unofficially, which he had done successfully with other such family problem cases in the past, Officer Chappell visited Mrs. Thompson at her home the following day to follow up on the previous visit, but nothing further was decided or acted upon after the visit. Additionally, Officer Chappell visited Michael Thompson at his place of employment and urged him to come forward, admit the theft, make some kind of restitution, or other arrangements with his mother to close the incident. Michael denied that he had taken the money and refused to cooperate with Officer Chappell regarding this incident in any way. However, on the following day, April 15, 1993, Thompson told several friends that she was planning to meet with Officer Chappell again regarding the case, stating that he wanted to compare serial numbers on the bills. Sadly, that was the last time any of her neighbors ever saw her alive. Later that day, around 9:45 p.m., the tranquility of the night was shattered by the sound of 2 gunshots. By the time people rushed to investigate, they found a grim scene. Emmogene Thompson, a 53-year-old grandmother, was discovered dead behind the steering wheel in the parking lot at Gwinnett Muffler. Her car had a flat front tire, and she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. It was later discovered that the perpetrator, motivated by greed, had stolen her purse, believed to contain a significant amount of money, which was all that remained of her inheritance, totaling $7,000 in $100 bills. Subsequently, police and fire units responded to a 911 emergency call by the owner of Gwinnett Muffler, who had discovered the body. Units of the Gwinnett County Police Department secured the area, and crime scene investigators examined the body, the automobile, and the surrounding area. The body of Mrs. Thompson was removed to the morgue behind Gwinnett County Police Headquarters, and the automobile was removed to what was the old helicopter hangar, which coincidentally was in the same building as the morgue on its opposite side. An autopsy of Mrs. Thompson revealed 2 gunshot wounds to the head, both of which would have been instantly fatal. Gwinnett County Police set up a roadblock on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard in front of the Gwinco Muffler Shop, asking passing motorists about what they may have seen if they had been passing the shop at about the time of the murder. Several witnesses stated that they had seen a white car, which may have been a police car, in the shop driveway facing Peachtree Industrial Boulevard. An eyewitness, Carl Cotter, who was passing the Gwinco Muffler Shop at approximately the time of the murder with a friend, gave information to the police that they had seen an automobile parked in the position Emmogene Thompson's car was found with a police car behind it. They stated that a policeman in rain gear was approaching the automobile with a flashlight in his hand. They further stated that the police car caught up with them on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, followed them for an unspecified time, then ran adjacent to them for 45 seconds, and finally pulled ahead of them, eventually turning off Peachtree Industrial Boulevard on Raymond A. Smith Street. There was an intervening traffic light. Still, neither automobile had to stop for it. Mr. Cotter stated that during the 45 seconds that the cars were adjacent, he had a good look at the officer in the police car, and he identified Officer Chappell from a photo lineup. Mr. and Mrs. Hutchins, who lived within a half-mile of the Gwinco Muffler Shop, told police that they heard what sounded like 2 gunshots within approximately 2 seconds of one another at approximately 9:45 p.m. on the night of the murder. However, it was later revealed that on the night of the murder, Officer Chappell, along with Officer Brian Reddy and State Stone, both of whom were also Gwinnett County police officers, were at the Gwinnett County Fire Station, which adjoins the police station from which all of these officers operated from sometime in the late afternoon or early evening until between 9:25 p.m. and 10:00 p.m. The reason they gave for their presence at the fire station was a severe storm in the area. Sometime during that period, the officers left the fire station and resumed their patrol activities. Fire department personnel who were familiar with the officers and witnessed their departure gave widely conflicting times of departure. Approximately 1 month later, Officer Michael Chappell was questioned regarding his involvement with Emmogene Thompson, his finances, and his whereabouts between 9:25 p.m. and 10:07 p.m. on the night of the murder. Officer Brian Reddy had been questioned about the night of the murder, and he had stated that Officer Chappell had not been with him and State Stone at the firehouse during the period between the late afternoon arrival and the time of Officer Reddy's departure from that building. Following a grueling 5.5-hour interview on the morning of April 24, 1993, Chappell was taken into custody for the murder and robbery of Emmogene Thompson. The Miranda warning, which Chappell had previously read to suspects during arrests, was now read to him by 2 of his fellow officers. The news of Chappell's arrest sent shockwaves throughout the community. The revelation that a respected member of Gwinnett's elite SWAT team could be involved in such a heinous crime left virtually everyone devastated. Despite Chappell's decorated career and reputation as an exemplary officer, the allegations against him were difficult to comprehend. For many, including Danny Porter, the district attorney, the news was particularly shocking. Porter, like others in law enforcement, had placed his trust in officers like Chappell to uphold the law and protect the community. The revelation of Chappell's alleged involvement in such a crime shattered that trust and left many grappling with disbelief and betrayal. Gwinnett County's district attorney, who had once trained Chappell in courtroom demeanor, expressed deep disappointment in Chappell's actions. Chappell's betrayal of trust brought shame to those involved in law enforcement. At some time after Officer Chappell's arrest, Officer Brian Reddy recanted his statement and admitted that he had lied about Officer Chappell's presence at the fire station. After Officer Chappell's arrest, police investigators conducted a luminal presumptive blood test on Officer Chappell's automobile and found trace blood evidence on the driver's armrest. Officer Chappell's police car had been parked in the police headquarters parking lot since his arrest. Subsequent DNA tests of the blood evidence indicated that it was the blood of Emmogene Thompson. However, the case went somewhat cold, and no further investigation of Mrs. Thompson's murder was made by the Gwinnett County Police Department or any other law enforcement agency. 2.5 years later, on August 4, 1995, Michael Chappell appeared in court for his trial. Chappell, who once swore to uphold the law, now faced the law himself. Accused of robbing and murdering Emmogene Thompson, Chappell's trial would determine his fate. The jury in Georgia had the challenging task of evaluating the evidence and deciding whether Chappell was guilty of murder and other charges. If found guilty, they would have to decide on the ultimate punishment. In the trial of the state of Georgia versus Michael Harold Chappell, held at the county courthouse in Lawrenceville, Georgia, the 34-year-old Chappell had spent over 2.5 years in jail, a significant portion of his children's lives. His supporters filled an entire row in the courtroom, confident that he would be proven innocent. Dolores Burrell, Emmogene Thompson's best friend, expressed the pain of losing her friend in such a tragic manner to the court, but hoped that the trial would bring closure. The Honorable Fred Bishop presided over his first death penalty case, ensuring the jury's sequestration to avoid external influence. Court sessions were scheduled from Monday to Saturday, with the judge urging the parties to proceed efficiently. The prosecution, led by the state, asserts Chappell's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, listing charges including malice murder, felony murder, armed robbery, and possession of a firearm during a felony. They promised to present evidence supporting their case over the coming days. Johnny Moore, speaking on behalf of Chappell, criticizes the case's foundation, alleging it was built on mere suspicion and guesses. The first witness, Mr. Portland, recounts under oath that he discovered Mrs. Thompson's body and recalls seeing blood on her arm and hand. The Gwinnett County Medical Examiner testified about the cause of Emmogene Thompson's death, stating she was shot twice, once in the back of her head and once on the left side of her neck. Witnesses who passed by the muffler shop around the time of the incident described seeing a Gwinnett County police car with a white male inside. William Hutchins, who heard the shots, described them as spaced apart, similar to hand claps. Another witness, Carl Carter, recounted seeing a police car beside him on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, identifying Michael Chappell as the officer he saw that day. However, during cross-examination, it was revealed that Chappell drove a newer car with rounded corners, while witnesses described seeing an older model patrol car. The prosecution attempted to establish a motive, highlighting Chappell's financial struggles and impending IRS audit. However, Chappell's accountant testified that the audit was not a significant concern. The focus then shifted to Chappell's personal checking account balance, presented by a bank manager as evidence. Thompson's son, Michael, was questioned about his interactions with Chappell, who responded to a call regarding missing money. Michael admitted to taking some of his mother's money and had been confronted by Chappell about it. Thompson's son claimed innocence, but it was later revealed that he had spent money from his mother's insurance policy on a Corvette and a cruise, yet didn't pay for her funeral. Prosecutors sought to include hearsay testimony from the victim's friends about a meeting she was to have with Chappell the night she died. While hearsay is typically not admissible in court, exceptions exist, such as when the speaker is deceased. This testimony was crucial for establishing a connection between Chappell and the victim. Marcia Arnold, a former colleague of Emmogene, testified about a conversation where Emmogene mentioned meeting with Mike Chappell to compare serial numbers on $100 bills. Virginia Chance, another colleague, also recalled speaking with Emmogene multiple times before her death and stated that Emmogene intended to compare the serial numbers on the bills she had with her to those Chappell had. However, the defense argued that the full context of these conversations may have been misinterpreted by Emmogene's friends, who were trying to make sense of her death. The DA contended that on April 15, 1993, Chappell lured Emmogene to the muffler shop, shot her twice with a Charter Arms .38 caliber pistol, stole approximately $7,000, and then spent the money on various purchases. Prosecutors presented evidence showing Chappell's spending spree shortly after the murder. He was seen at the Sunshine Car Wash, paying with a $100 bill, and later bought items at a gym he owned, Iron World, using several $100 bills. Chappell also bailed out a friend of his wife's from jail with cash. Aaron Chappell, Mike Chappell's wife's friend, was also spotted carrying a significant amount of cash after the murder. The DA called Chappell's fellow officers to testify, revealing that Chappell had breached his oath as a police officer by allegedly using his position to gain the trust of the victim and lure her to a vulnerable location, which they argued constituted murder. They played parts in Chappell's interrogation, where he was confronted with evidence about a previous burglary at the victim's residence, which Chappell had failed to report. During the interrogation, Chappell maintained his innocence, claiming he was at the North Side Precinct Firehouse at the time of the murder. However, his friends on the force testified that they couldn't confirm his whereabouts during that time. Prosecutors attempted to link physical evidence, such as a rain slicker with blood splatters found in Chappell's locker, to the crime scene. Additionally, they presented a pocket knife found at Chappell's gym, suggesting it could have been used to slash the victim's tire. However, the defense argued that various other scenarios could have caused the blood splatter, and the knife may not necessarily be linked to the crime. In cross-examining Chappell, Johnny Moore brings up another potential suspect, a fellow officer named J.P. Morgan, who had died by suicide 3 weeks after Emmogene Thompson's death. Moore suggests that the investigation into Morgan's death revealed missing evidence from the precinct, prompting suspicion within the police force. However, the details of this report were withheld until after Chappell's trial, raising concerns about the thoroughness of the investigation and whether Morgan's possible involvement was adequately explored. Moore criticizes the police for not providing transparent information to the jury, calling it misleading and inappropriate. Elizabeth Rogan, Chappell's defense attorney, counters with an emotional plea, urging the jury to consider Thompson's last moments and the possibility of planted evidence. She appeals to the jury's sense of doubt, urging them to find Chappell not guilty based on the lack of conclusive evidence. In response to the DA's redirect examination, Chappell speculates that he may have been targeted by the police as a scapegoat due to mistakes made during the investigation. However, he admits he does not have a clear explanation as to why he was specifically implicated in the crime. After 13 days of testimony and 95 witnesses, the Gwinnett County District Attorney, represented by Mr. Danny Porter, delivers his closing argument. He paints a vivid picture of the events leading to Emmogene Thompson's murder, alleging that Mike Chappell lured her out under the guise of helping her, only to fatally shoot her. Porter implores the jury to deliver a verdict of guilty, emphasizing the severity of the crime and the need for justice. After 18.5 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict, and they declared Chappell guilty on all counts. Chappell is then convicted of murder, felony murder, armed robbery, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. As the sentencing phase begins, both sides present their arguments. The prosecution seeks the death penalty, citing the heinous nature of the crime and Chappell's lack of remorse. The defense pleads for mercy, highlighting Chappell's family and the possibility of rehabilitation. Chappell's family members also address the jury, begging for leniency and expressing their love for him. Rogan argues against the death penalty, questioning Chappell's redemption and urging the jury to choose life imprisonment instead. Ultimately, the jury is tasked with making a decision that will profoundly impact Chappell's life. They must weigh the severity of the crime against Chappell's humanity, grappling with the question of whether he deserves the ultimate punishment. After a tense morning, the jury returns with their decision regarding the penalty phase. They find that the statutory aggravating circumstance of armed robbery exists beyond a reasonable doubt. However, despite this finding, They choose to sentence Michael Howard Chappell to life imprisonment rather than the death penalty. This decision was reached on September 10, 1995. For Chappell, his life sentence may not feel like a victory, given the gravity of his situation. District Attorney Danny Porter vowed to fight against any parole consideration, ensuring that Chappell remains incarcerated for life. In a bittersweet turn of events, Elizabeth Rogan receives a letter from one of the alternate jurors, expressing a firm conviction in Chappell's innocence. This letter underscores the emotional complexities of the case and the lingering doubts surrounding Chappell's guilt. Furthermore, the Gwinnett County Police Department later released a report indicating Chappell's suspected involvement in robbery cases in neighboring DeKalb County, as well as another homicide and armed robbery in Gwinnett. The District Attorney's Office initiates investigations into these allegations, adding another layer of complexity to Chappell's legal ordeal. In conclusion, the trial of Michael Howard Chappell was a complex and emotionally charged legal saga that captivated the community. From the initial investigation to the tense courtroom proceedings, every moment was filled with drama and uncertainty. Despite the jury's decision to sentence Chappell to life imprisonment rather than the death penalty, lingering questions remain about his innocence or guilt. So guys, what are your thoughts on this trial? Do you believe Chappell received a fair trial? What aspects of the case do you find most compelling? If you enjoyed this story and want to stay updated on similar legal dramas, be sure to subscribe for more content.